If a big part of that is the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, how impactful would it be on the state of Wisconsin, let alone, the rest of the country, to make those tax cuts permanent? What does that mean for businesses and families moving forward?
I mean, you can't deny the certainty of what that would mean for businesses. There's so many volatilities when it comes to our economy. And if we could give certainty to these small business owners that, okay, that tax cut's not going to go away in a year, in 2 years, in 3 years, or whatever an extension would be, but give them the permanency, the expansion that they would be confident in would the benefits, you can't even fathom what that would mean for their families, for their employees, the families and employees, the local communities. How many more soccer teams could they sponsor in their local community? How many more employees could they hire? How many more families could be supported by those really good wages and benefits? I mean, it's undeniable that the permanency for a business would be an incredible motivator.
Americans are capable of achieving extraordinary things when they have the freedom and opportunity to do so. This is American Potential. And here's your host, Jeff Crank.
Hey, welcome to another episode of American Potential. The Tax Cuts and Jobs Act has been beneficial for small businesses and for individuals. It's allowed people to keep more of their hard-earned money. But those tax cuts, they're temporary. And they're set to expire at the end of next year unless Congress takes action. Yep, you're going to get a giant tax increase unless Congress takes action. But that's not the only issue Congress faces. There's also several upcoming deadlines related to government spending. And when you combine both of these issues, it's known as the fiscal cliff. Now, that's why Americans for Prosperity is talking to federal lawmakers about the fiscal cliff at its annual Capitol Conference. Now, this is where Americans for Prosperity state teams fly into D.C. so they can talk to federal lawmakers face to face and share what people back home are saying. Now, unfortunately, I couldn't attend this year, but we brought in a guest host to talk about the impact of the fiscal cliff.
Americans for Prosperity is celebrating its 20th anniversary, and we've grown from working on our first issue, which was stopping a tax increase in the state of Kansas, to now having a presence in all 50 states. Over that time, AFP started to bring state chapters to the nation's capital to talk to federal lawmakers about the issues that the nation is facing. They named this event Capitol Conference. This year, Capitol Conference, the issue that Americans for Prosperity is focusing on is the fiscal cliff. Like Jeff said at the beginning of the podcast, he wasn't able to make it to Capitol Conference this year. And since the fiscal cliff is an important issue to discuss, the podcast asked if I could fill in. My name is Drew Klein, and I'm one of the regional vice presidents for Americans for Prosperity. So part of the fiscal cliff is the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act expiring at the end of next year, which has been beneficial for businesses and individuals. Today's guest is from the state of Wisconsin, and if it wasn't for one of her senators, businesses would have been left out of the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, including 90% of businesses in Wisconsin. I want to welcome back to the podcast Megan Novak, who is the state director for AFP in Wisconsin. So Jeff always likes to start with some interesting facts about our guests, and it turns out that you have a pretty fascinating collection. Tell us a little bit about that, Megan.
Well, thanks for having me on, first of all. And I am a little embarrassed to admit, I have collected gnomes from around the world. It started as kind of a joke with my grandparents when I was 12 years old, and they asked, what can we bring back to you from our trip to England? And I was like, I don't know, a garden gnome sounds kind of funny. And ever since then, I've been able to collect them from around the world and around the country. And so I've got quite the collection of garden gnomes that are not actually in a garden at this point. They're on a shelf.
Tell me, how big is this collection? How big are we talking?
Less than 100.
Okay. That's reasonable.
I don't want to get fact checked if I give the wrong number.
That's right. Well, like I mentioned, Americans for Prosperity is celebrating its 20th anniversary. It's been around for a while. When did you first hear about Americans for Prosperity?
The first time I heard about Americans for Prosperity was when I was working in the Wisconsin State Legislature, and we were working on, not me personally, but there was a big bill of some cronyism and corporate welfare that was pushing through, and I was an intern, and everyone was all up in arms because they were like, oh my gosh, AFP is going to kill this, AFP, and I was like, guys, I'm an intern. What's AFP? And then I really got to know who Americans for Prosperity was, got to know some of the leadership there. And I was like, oh, guys, I think I'm with them. Like, these sound like my kind of people. And continued working in state government for a while, the governor's office and state legislature, and eventually found my way over here because I was really passionate about how they approached policy change and the things that they cared about.
Yeah, how did that jump go? The move from working under the dome for the legislature to AFP. What brought you to AFP?
If I'm going to be completely honest, my boss lost his election, and so I really needed a job.
The permanent infrastructure is a big selling point,
yes,
for sure.
I was really blessed, though. I mean, it's crazy when a governor loses an election. You've got 50 full-time staff who are out of a job, and we're all competing for the same couple government affairs policy type jobs that are open. And I really wanted to come to AFP. I was like, no, so I fought tooth and nail to get here, even though it was kind of out of desperation. I needed to still, pay my mortgage and afford groceries. But this was the one that I wanted. It wasn't just like a shot in the dark, like fingers crossed I need a job. It was, I need to come to AFP and fight for the things that they're fighting for.
Absolutely. Share with our listeners one of your favorite stories from AFP over the years.
There's so many, but I think one of the best is we had 2 new guys start with our Florida team, and they got sent up to Wisconsin to train on how to knock doors in the middle of winter. And one of the guys is originally from Cuba and had never seen snow in his entire life. And in true Wisconsin fashion, we brought him into a blizzard to go knock doors, and the pure joy on his face of seeing snow for the first time and hearing about how he never thought that was going to be possible because he never thought he would get to come to America in the first place. And there he was living in America, joining AFP and CVA, and then coming to Wisconsin to knock doors in a blizzard it was so inspiring. Like, I will never complain about doing doors in any weather ever again because I watched someone who had never seen snow do doors in a blizzard.
Yeah, that's incredible. Well, I want to turn to the fiscal cliff and the reason that you're here in the nation's capital for Capitol Conference. How did your senator get businesses included in the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act when this was originally being passed? Tell us a little bit about that story.
Senator Ron Johnson, one of our favorite people in Wisconsin, when the original Tax Cuts and Jobs Act was proposed, for the corporate tax rate, it only included traditional corporations. It did not include S corps, which are pass-through entities. And in Wisconsin, it's 90% of our businesses are filed as S corps. It's a lot of family-run small businesses who file this way, and they would not have been included originally in the tax cut. And Senator Johnson was like, that's a huge problem. That's 90% of the businesses in my home state. It's thousands and millions of businesses across the entire country. Like, if we really want to spur economic growth and spur innovation and put more money into the pockets of these small businesses, they need to be included in this tax cut. And we can't just limit it to the big companies out there. And so Senator Johnson was able to put together a pretty strong coalition of other members who felt the same way he did and kind of held up the bill until he could get the S corps included, which is incredible because we're seeing the benefits all across the state of Wisconsin.
Yeah, I think there's this effort to demonize businesses or to somehow try to downplay the impact that they have. But we're not just talking about huge businesses, big businesses in Wisconsin. These 90% of the businesses, as you just said, these are small businesses. What was the impact on the state of Wisconsin, by having those businesses, those S corps included?
I think about Rick, who lives over in Star Prairie, Wisconsin. It's a small town over by the Minnesota border. He owns a pizza shop there. And his business was struggling before the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, really kind of just trying to make ends meet. He's thriving now because he was able to reinvest in his business and his employees, give a lot of his employees a pay raise. And now we connected with him. He knows how important Senator Johnson was in that effort and AFP's partnership with Senator Johnson. And now he lets us host phone banks at his pizza place every week because he was like, yeah, if you guys help do this, like, this is incredible. I need to help support you. And this is his way of giving back to his community by letting us host his phone banks there. But it's stories like that. I mean, Rick owns a small pizza shop all across the state, whether it's a pizza shop, a coffee shop, a small dairy farm. Like, these are the people who matter and who are reinvesting in expanding their business, giving their employees a pay raise, adding additional benefits for their employees. that is driving the Wisconsin economy right now.
Yeah. Tell me a little bit. So we're here, we're kind of replicating those meetings that, driving the importance of the communities, the activists, folks like these pizza shop owners that live in the real economy every day. Tell me a little bit about kind of what you're hearing on Capitol Hill and in these meetings as part of Capitol Conference this week.
The thing that is so impactful about AFP being here is that it's not me going and meeting with the elected officials from Wisconsin. I'm backing it up with the thousands of grassroots activists that we have in Wisconsin, and I can come in and I can tell their stories. I can talk about Rick and his pizza shop. I can talk about Ashley in Southwest Wisconsin. Her and her husband own a heating and cooling business, and how the tax cuts have impacted their business and their ability to thrive and provide for their family. And when we come in here, not just me, but all of AFP comes in backed up by thousands of grassroots activists and their stories, the elected officials want to listen to us because they're passionate about this too. And, you can only connect with so many constituents on a day, and we can help make that bridge, make that connection, and give them the stories that can help change public policy, because facts can only get you so far in a policy debate. They're important. But once you add the personal stories to it and you can start talking about the Ricks and the Ashleys of Wisconsin, all of a sudden you can drive real policy change.
So clearly we're focused on this fiscal cliff. A big part of that is the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act. How impactful would it be on the state of Wisconsin, let alone the rest of the country, to make those tax cuts permanent? What does that mean for businesses and families moving forward?
I mean, you can't deny the certainty of what that would mean for businesses. There's so many volatilities when it comes to our economy. And if we could give certainty to these small business owners that, okay, that tax cut's not going to go away in a year, in 2 years, in 3 years, or whatever an extension would be, but give them the permanency, the expansion that they would be confident in would the benefits, you can't even fathom what that would mean for their families, for their employees, the families and the employees, the local communities. How many more soccer teams could they sponsor in their local community? How many more employees could they hire? How many more families could be supported by those really good wages and benefits? I mean, it's undeniable that the permanency for a business would be an incredible motivator to expand and to innovate.
And, just to put a fine bow on this, we're both Midwesterners, you and I. You're from Wisconsin. I live in Iowa. One of the things that's really important in the Midwest is just the quality of gas stations. It's a big deal. Do you think that this could help Quick Trip catch up to the quality of Casey's with their pizzas?
I mean, Midwest is best, first of all. Wisconsin is the best of the best, and Quick Trip will undeniably continue to have better gas station food than Quick Trip, especially if these are made permanent. I mean, now you get one food, the rest of the food Quick Trip is better at.
All right. Well, I appreciate the certainty there. Jeff talks all of the time about the importance of liberty and freedom and the way that it has changed and shaped this country. Those are easily taken for granted. I would encourage you, don't be a spectator in this game and in the battle for the future of our country. Get off of the sidelines. Be more than a spectator. If you'd like to get connected with Americans for Prosperity in your state to be able to do just that, reach out to Jeff. Shoot him an email at jeff@americanpotential.com, and he'll connect you to a state chapter so that you can be more involved. The American Potential podcast is always working on stories to help keep you inspired and informed. The best way to stay connected is by liking and subscribing to our channel, as well as following us on Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube. If you know of a great story of someone that is working on expanding freedom and opportunities that we should share, be sure to visit americanpotential.com and fill out Share Your Story. Thank you so much, and thanks for joining us.
Thank you for listening to American Potential. You may listen to more stories from Americans working every day to expand freedom and opportunity in their communities by visiting americanpotential.com.